Perfect. Hello, I think we are live. I'm gonna have the comments going in case. Hello everybody. Hope everyone is having a good Saturday. So I wanted to hop on here. I know we had an episode on Monday about fear. This Monday, I think I'm going to do an episode on porn. I think there's just so many things just being thrown out about porn and how it's really bad for you. And then some people are saying it's really good for you. And I don't know. I've read certain things already about it, like just throughout my life. And there's some good things about it and some bad things about it. So we're going to talk about it on Monday. But today I just wanted to hop on here. I didn't really plan exactly what I'm going to say. Because of all of the media attention that we have been seeing on the situation in Iran with Mahsa Amini. I'm sure most of you know, but if you don't know, she was a young woman in Iran who was killed essentially for wearing her hijab improperly. Hey, Hazard Stamp. So, and then protests have broken out. They have restricted internet access. I have a lot of family in Iran, and I don't get to hear from them as often. Some of my cousins and stuff are really great tech whizzes, and they can sometimes bypass for a limited time the internet block, and we're able. So I know they're okay, but yeah, it's definitely very sad, and something that has been going on for a really long time that maybe some people didn't know about until this happened and these protests broke out, and we've gotten a lot of social media attention on it and all of that. So just a little background for some of you that don't know. So Iran, hope they're doing all right. Thank you. So prior to 1979, so in 1979, there was a revolution. And I think about this all the time. And this is one of the reasons I want to speak about it, because I am here in a free country, able to be an Iranian adult content creator, right? I'm over here completely free, able to post whatever I want. And I post everything online. And there are women that are getting murdered for showing their hair, right, by the morality police. And yes, morality police are a real thing in Iran and some other countries in the Middle East. But in 1979, there was a revolution. So prior to that, the Shah, so it was a monarchy, and the Shah ruled Iran. And if you're to look at it from our standards, right? And that's something that's really hard. It was hard for me too. And it still is a little hard for me because I think of things as Western standards, right? And I'm like, oh, well, people still didn't have freedom of speech, without realizing that, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, these are privileges that most of the world does not have. In fact, most of the world, even Western countries, don't even have it to the extent that we have it here in the United States, which I'm very happy about. That's, I think, one of the great things about the United States of America is that we value freedom of speech and freedom of expression so much. But there are many countries who don't have that. So, when I was younger and I was looking at the reign of the Shah, I was like, well, he used to imprison people who spoke out against him. He was a bad guy. When we see things really black and white growing up, I'm sure, I remember the first time I learned that Martin Luther King had cheated on his wife. I was like, oh, or that George Washington had slaves. I was like, oh, right. And there's far more things about these, especially George Washington, that I found out later that even, pissed me off more. But you can't think about it in those terms. We talked about this a few episodes ago, where you can't really put yourself into somebody else's shoes or into somebody else's, not that you can't have empathy for them, but you can't really put yourself with everything in the country you grew up in, with your mind and your everything, and just throw yourself into another situation, especially in a different time period or a different culture or a different country, and feel like you can give a good, that you can really do that accurately and accurately depict how you would behave or how you would think, because you just can't. And anyway, so prior to that, though, the Shah, I mean, by our standards, it wasn't like, as free as the United States. But if you look at, and I think this has been going around on social media, women were able to dress however they wanted, short skirts, like people would be wearing like a top like I'm wearing right now. And that was completely fine. Not to say that there wasn't a group of people that were far more religious. I mean, even in the United States, we have conservative people who want to like ban what I'm doing online, although I'm able to do it, right? So yeah, that was the case. 1979, there was a revolution, and the Ayatollah Khomeini came into power and basically made it Islamic law now ruled the land, right? So it was like an overnight shift. I was not yet born, but my mom actually, so they like literally closed the universities down. Like overnight, women could not go anymore. My mom was actually involved in some of these protests. She was actually in jail there for like a month in like solitary. And that was right before that. Once they released her, like right after that, they started executing like a bunch of people. So she was really lucky that she wasn't executed. So many people were executed. Like that's something that I also think about a lot, is that what happens in our country where we see, and I'm not saying not to speak out about it, when you see like, instances of suppression and, instances where protesters are clashing, or instances where with law enforcement, all that is something we should speak about, and we have the right to speak about it. And that's what we should use our voice, especially because we're able to. But when you compare it to what goes on in other countries, like you don't have rights over there. Like you can't just like, get arrested, be like, well, why am I arrested? Can I see my lawyer? Where's my phone call? No, you don't have any of that, right? They don't, you have nothing. You have absolutely zero rights. And this isn't just the case in Iran, but Iran is a good example. So yeah, so that happened in 1979. That changed everything, and that implemented Islamic law as the law of the land. And one of the rules with that is that you have to cover your hair. If you're a woman, you have to cover your hair. You have to wear long sleeves. Their actual rules are far more strict than what is actually implemented. For those of you that don't like, so for instance, you're technically not supposed to wear makeup, nail polish, or any of that. But if you go over there, I mean, everybody's wearing makeup and stuff. And most women wear it like back here. So for the most part, it's been pretty relaxed. And Massa was not even wearing it in a way that a lot of women don't wear it, right? But the morality police go around and they kind of pick somebody. Sorry. I'm gonna just turn off the volume on this. They kind of pick somebody sometimes to make an example out of. And that's kind of why I have not been there since I was of age. So it's women older than 9. I was there a little bit, like when I think I was like 10, 11. And so I could get away with being 9 years old. So I didn't have to follow dress code. But after that, I was like, and a lot of people there, they know how to not like they can handle the morality police, but they know how to like interact with them. I wouldn't know how to do that. So I'd be like, oh my God. So that's one of the reasons I never wanted to go, which is really sad. And this revolution is the reason that so many Iranians, if they were able to, left Iran. Prior to, I think, the revolution, there wasn't a ton of Iranians here. Besides like people coming to study, which is what my dad did. He came to get his degree and the revolution happened, and he was planning to go back. He never did go back because of that. So yeah. And I think about it all the time. Like it's such a terrible thing that something like this happened and the revolution happened, and how many lives it affected. I mean, I wouldn't be in the United States if the revolution never happened. My whole life would have been different. And the lives of so many other Iranian families and their children, and like me, that ended up being second generation immigrants in the United States or in Europe, etc. And, for me, since that I grew up here, especially growing up, I just thought it was like, oh, whatever, like some distant thing. But my parents, especially my dad, he's been heartbroken for, I mean, how many years has it been? 1979 is 2022. I mean, you do the math. Like, you know, they want more than anything for this government to be booted out. And so yeah, that's one thing that I always think about, is how it puts things into perspective when I think about, you know, especially nowadays, all of the injustices that are going on even here, and some of the ways that our country is going, which is really sad and really disappointing. But I'm reminded to still always be grateful that I still have the privilege of living somewhere like this, when so many of other girls of my heritage don't have that privilege. So that's one thing that, hold on. Hi, Americans live in a very privileged bubble. Yes, this is true. Very true. And again, I really want to make clear, it's not to say that you shouldn't be speaking about out about the injustices that are going on in America. However, do so while realizing that you like don't, if you're sitting here like, oh my God, you know, I'm scared, my rights, you still have a lot of rights here in the United States that you do not have in places like Iran. And especially for somebody like me, that if that revolution ever happened, I would have been in Iran, my whole life would be different. I always think about that, like how one event has changed lives for generations to come. I also think that, hey Ricky, I guess now with this, we're seeing that, but for a long time, or I think for a lot of Americans that are more ignorant on this, they don't separate the people with the government, right? They think of it as, and that's a lot of times where, you know, we even saw that with the coronavirus recently, right? People started hating Chinese people, right? And like, I am no fan of the Chinese government, right? We talked about this in our episode with Lana, but I can separate the government from its people. And I think part of the reason I can do that so well is because coming from Iran and seeing the government and then seeing the people, and how the people in Iran, it is a very, very, very small percentage that, and even that small percentage doesn't agree with what happened here, but there is a very, very, very small percentage that even likes this government at all. Even like very conservative, and that's one thing that's being pointed out now, even very conservative, religiously conservative people in Iran that want a theocracy don't agree with what's going on and all the corruption and, you know, murdering people over this. So that's something, and I think that the US media doesn't really do a good job of, you know, depicting Iranian people and Iranian culture as separate from its government, right? They just show you like people on the street like screaming, like, you know, the death to America stuff with the hostage crisis and stuff, which again, very, very small percentage of people that did that. Like it would be like a group of people protesting, and that would be all the media would show. I even think like the way that they don't talk about the history of Iran and the Persian Empire, like growing up, and all of the contributions that the Persian Empire actually made to society and to human advancement and math and engineering and like human rights, actually, right? The cylinder of human rights, Cyrus's cylinder of human rights. If you guys don't know about it, you should look it up. But that's something that the US, because they kind of, they teach you about the Greeks, the Romans, but Persians, you know. So that's just a reminder to always, you know, you're taught one thing, you're taught a narrative. And now that we're older and we're in the age of information, kind of goes back to that question everything, right? Maybe everything you learned isn't completely accurate. Maybe there's a piece of the story that you're missing. Maybe what you see in media, depicted in media, isn't the whole story. And maybe they're trying a lot of the time to. And I think with social media, this is one area where social media can kind of help, and being on the internet with the age of information can help, but it can also go the other way too. And just be mindful of what you're saying. And especially if you're somebody that was born and raised here, and your whole entire family was born and raised here, and you don't have, you're not very cultured, to not assume, right? Kind of like these Trump people, we're the best, everybody loves us. Like, no, They don't. Like, you know what I mean? So that's another thing I was thinking about. What else? Yeah, like I said, I didn't really plan what I'm confused about. Is Iranian government extremely religious, or are extremely corrupted, or both? So I think you're asking, like, are they just extremely religious and that's why they're doing this, or are they extremely corrupted and they're using religion as a means to justify their actions, their corruption? It's both. It's both. So, and that's something else I want to talk about. There is a lot of people that are saying, okay, you know, this isn't against Islam, this is against what they're doing. And I agree with that 100%. Most Muslims, I don't, and I'm only saying most because I don't know every single Muslim, but every single Muslim that I know of / have seen speak out about this has been against the government. Like, this is not something that Muslim people condone by any means. Even the compulsory hijab is not something that the vast majority of Muslims condone. However, that being said, this is something that I do also feel very strongly about, is that there is this tendency in the United States, and this is especially a tendency on the left, which I've seen a lot, that has always bothered me, because I know it's well-meaning, but to me it does more damage than good, is this idea of kind of moral, oh, okay, you know, well, that's what they do over there and that's their culture and we have to respect that, you know, and over here, you know, we do. No, violation of human rights is a violation of human rights, right? And when people do this and they don't speak out against compulsory hijab in countries, against the persecution of homosexuals in countries, against this kind of ideology, whether it's cultural or enforced by the government, you are leaving behind the marginalized groups of people in all of these countries that need us the most, right? Atheists that live in the Middle East, where that is a crime punishable by death. Homosexuality, a woman like me, I would be in very big trouble if I was doing this in Iran. And it feels like, for me, it feels like we, and I can't say this for me because I live here, but it feels like if the girls in Iran like me, and the people in Iran that don't, that are literally, their lives are in danger because of this disregard for human rights and human autonomy and choice, are being left behind sometimes because the people in our country or in the West, some people are so scared or don't want to offend or don't want to be called Islamophobic, and are scared because this is like, I mean, I think Majid Nawaz was the person who deemed it the bigotry of low expectations. And I think that's true. It's oh, well, you know, they're brown people and that's just what they do. I remember I was in a college class and I went to a very liberal university, and there was a class where they were literally trying to say that genital mutilation of children, which this doesn't really happen in Iran, this happens like in Somalia and some other countries, we can't really judge because, you know, that's them. And we can't really say that. How do we know that our values or Western values and Western ideals are better, right? It's us being paternalistic to go there and be like, well, no, you guys are doing things wrong. This is how you value human rights. Like, there is no objective means of determining right and wrong, or, you know, it's just all relative, right? It's okay, like, you know, we don't think you should murder gay people, but they do, and they have a right to do that. We can now, I'm not saying we should go invade them and like force them to listen to us. No, but we can't be afraid to speak out about this stuff. We can't be afraid to say that, no, this ideology is wrong, and people should be able to live freely, and people should be able to believe freely. And some of this is embedded, some of these ideals, like, you know, we're so quick to judge Christianity here and how Christianity views homosexuality and women and how it's sexist and all this, but we're kind of, sometimes we're afraid to touch on that when it comes to that. It's either that people actually are Islamophobic and which Islamophobic to me is just it's like a word that doesn't really mean anything. It's like criticizing doctrine doesn't mean you hate people, right? Islam is an idea, just like Christianity is an idea. Any idea should be discussed and debated and should be criticized, right? That's just what it is. So no, you shouldn't be here and be like, oh, Muslim people. No, that's not what you should say. But you can say, hey, this doctrine is problematic. And, while we can talk about and I hate having to be constrained to scripture to try to, when it comes to intellectually talking about things or intellectual debate or intellectual reasoning, it sucks having to be confined to the boundaries of what is in this doctrine, right? So the mental, oh no, it doesn't really say that. Oh no, because in those times it was this and no, we can say that things are objectively wrong when they're objectively wrong, whether they're in the religion or not. And we can even talk about that, right? Killing this woman because she's not wearing proper hijab is not justified by the religion at all anywhere, right? But this idea that women should be covered is, and I think we can criticize both, right? Not saying you don't have the choice. If you want to believe what you want to believe, you can believe it and you can live by it. I was also vehemently against what France was doing when they were trying to ban the burqa, right? I think being in a burqa is an absolutely absurd decision, but you're the one that's making the decision, not me. And you should have the right to make that decision. But I also want to sit here and say, that's kind of stupid for you to do that, in my opinion. And I can give you the reasons why, that I don't think human beings should have to live their lives covered so that they don't incite lust in the opposite gender, or that is the way to create a good, well, respectful society. And so another angle of this is obviously she should have not been killed. But this link between what women choose to do and women's modesty to morality, I think, is something that should be discussed more and more and more and more everywhere, right? And again, this just shows how arbitrary any guy, like, right? So what I do is probably considered immoral by almost anybody who believes that morality and modesty and sexual purity are linked. But there are countries where me wearing this would make me very immoral, like some places in the Middle East, and people who abide by certain types of ideologies. Like we said, in Iran, showing your hair is immoral. If you're living in accordance with what the Quran says, you should be covering your hair, and we should be able to say, hey, that's bullshit. You shouldn't have to do that. If you want to do it, if you really want to believe this, fine. But why is that? Why, right? Question it, criticize it. And when people do it here, right? When people say, oh, these women are wearing this, or they're on Instagram half naked, they're doing this, they're doing that. Again, this is a complete split from forcing people to do something or inflicting violence on them. That is a no-brainer. We all know that's wrong, right? But then let's go to the next level and be like, okay, well, where do these ideologies come from? We should be speaking out against that too, or we should be questioning that too. We should be questioning anybody and do that, right? I will tell you that I was visiting my family, and my aunt was talking about her disdain for Kim Kardashian. And she goes, yeah, she got famous off doing that disgusting sex tape. That's why I don't like her, because she had sex on camera. And there are plenty of reasons not to like the Kardashians, right? They're not very honest. That's probably the main thing for me, is they're I know that a lot of people also don't like they think they're emblematic of capitalism and all the things wrong with America. To me, that's really not it. I just don't like that they're dishonest, right? Like, I think Kim Kardashian recently was just like, oh, I have never had plastic surgery. Like, I don't know what kind of psychosis you have to like think that was the move, but whatever. But for my aunt, it was literally, oh, she had this sex tape. And I'm like, wow. So of all the things that you could dislike about somebody, of all the things that could make you angry, you are angry that a woman chose to have sex on camera, not harming anybody, right? Choosing to do that. And now you have deemed her immoral and disgusting, really disgusting. And those are the times where you should maybe speak up and be like, so what did she do wrong? Oh, well, she had sex on camera. Why is that wrong? Well, and usually what's going to go back to with these people is religion, or that's going to be the appeal to like an authority, right, that they have, and then be like, okay, well, and this is kind of like, and I didn't really say this to her, but I think we were in the car and we were like getting drive-through, so it wasn't like the right context, but I find them annoying. Yeah, I agree with that. I've never watched like an episode of their show because there's just so many better things to watch. I don't hate them, but I don't think they're that interesting. Same thing with like the royal family. Like, can someone explain to me why we're interested in that? Like, what's so interesting about? I don't get it. Okay, anyways, but yeah, I be like, and usually they'll be like, well, I believe in God said this, and then at minimum you could be like, okay, well, that's what you believe based on your religion, but other people don't follow that. And if somebody, so you believe this because the Bible says it or the Quran says it, and there are many people who don't ascribe to that, right? And do you really want to spend your time with all the injustices going on in the world, all the things that you can find actually disgusting, to really shame women for this? And it's something that people just, it seems like embedded in them, right? Ugh, porn stars, girls who are sexually or morally loose with their sexuality. And yeah, every time somebody, and people do this all the time, and it's something that is specific. And like I've said before, we see this in the porn industry all the time, where you can argue that porn may not be good to consume, or that you should be careful with how you consume it because it can have negative side effects. Fine, but there's also this hatred that also goes towards porn stars, right? We don't, even though there are plenty of things that are also bad for you, like we don't hate people who create fast food. We don't hate people who, sell alcohol, even though alcohol can have many negative effects, like porn, I would argue more. We don't hate people who, run casinos. Gambling can be an addiction too. But for some reason, when it's porn or when it's this or when it's sexuality and women are inciting lust, people have rage, disgust. They want to police other women. Why is she dressed like that? Why is she doing this? Why is she sleeping with this many people? Doesn't she have any respect? Doesn't she have any dignity? And these attitudes are attitudes that we need to start questioning. And that's part of the reason I started this channel. Why? Right? What's your argument? What is your argument about why making a sex tape makes somebody disgusting and immoral? Right? Don't just let people say this stuff freely and not force them to explain themselves. That's something that we should all be doing. Force them to explain themselves. Why? And they never really, they'd be hard pressed. I've never heard anybody have a legitimate reason outside of pointing to religious authority. That's really the only place they can go. And there are still people who don't subscribe to a religious authority that still think this way because it's embedded in all of us through society. And those are the people that when you question them, you may be able to change their minds, because they're going to realize, oh yeah, why do I think this? Right? Right? We've even shifted our views on sexuality a lot since like I was like in middle school, for instance. I've even shifted it because we've had these conversations. When you're a kid, you just are like, oh, that person is a slut. Okay, that's bad. And then I looked up the definition of slut. Like literally look up what the definition of slut is. And I'm like, why is this even negative? And then you realize like that we just have so many assumptions in our society, and other people have just done our thinking for us, and we just kind of were like, okay, this is a bad word. A woman who has many casual sexual partners. Why is that negative? Why is that? Why have there been girls who have killed themselves over being called this in school through bullying and stuff, because they were just like, oh, this is a really bad thing. A woman who has many sexual, as someone who doesn't have very many casual sexual partners, I think this could be a fun way to live if that makes you happy. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna look at some of these comments. Every generation interprets sacred texts in a way that makes sense to them in their culture, community, etc., but they also tend to enforce their interpretation as if it's the only one that matters. There's no room to question the religious authority of the, if we can throw this comment up on the screen, there's no room to question the religious authority of these fundamentalist leaders because they hide behind an ancient doctrine that also happens to serve their own corrupt political purposes. So yes, very, very true. Now, that's very true, but I also want to point out that, okay, so there's the reality. The reality is these ancient scriptures exist and a lot of people abide by them. So I'm very happy for reformists in any religion that are trying to interpret the text or argue for an interpretation of the text that aligns better with what our values are now. I think that is more effective than what I do, right? I argue from an intellectual standpoint, and for me, it's intellectually dishonest to look at this text and try to do mental gymnastics to try to be like, oh, you know, right? Like in Islam, Muhammad had 4 wives, which I don't really have an issue with, but one of them was 9 years old. Okay, I have an issue with that. And when you talk about it, people are like, well, that was back in the, okay, well, back then people were da-da-da-da-da, and yet when somebody in these countries are marrying child brides and they're like, well, our prophet did it, now because you've subscribed to this and you think this is the truth and you think this is the true word of the Lord, you're confined and you have to explain away these instances that are clearly there or clearly in scripture, right? And a lot of times it's like I want these people to win, but intellectually speaking, they don't have the intellectual high ground here, right? Sometimes the scripture is the scripture. It could have said, we're marrying a 9-year-old now, but in 2022, let's not do this anymore. It didn't say that. So now you're stuck trying to have to make up all these arguments about why it is immoral to do this, even though the prophet that you're claiming that you love and did nothing wrong did this without explaining why this shouldn't continue to happen for the rest of fucking human existence. So that's something that always irks me because, but I'm not going to be able to go into these countries and eradicate religion. It's much easier. And like Hazard Stent pointed out, our interpretations of Christianity, Islam, all this have evolved as time goes on because our standards have evolved and because human beings, you know, are becoming more advanced and we're realizing, oh, you know, that's kind of stupid. So that's what we're seeing now, even with people trying to explain the Bible. Oh no, the Bible loves Jesus was gay and stuff that isn't actually an intellectually honest point, right? Although I'm very happy that you're fighting for the rights of the marginalized and the LGBTQ community, having to do it within the bounds of a doctrine that, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the majority of people, does not condone this behavior, right? We have words, and the words say this, right? So in this situation with the Muslims, or I mean with the Muslims over here, that they're saying, oh, it shouldn't be compulsory. Great. But if you're Muslim now and it's not compulsory, but it's right, that women should cover their hair according to your religion. And I think we can't be afraid to have to question that either, right? You don't think that people should be forced to cover their hair or that people should be killed for covering their hair, but you think women should cover their hair. And it is a question of morality whether or not they do it. If you don't want to stop at hair, because as time goes on, a lot of Muslims, like my two aunts are Muslim, and they don't believe, they have completely reinterpreted the religion to say you should not cover, you don't have to cover your hair at all. But you also, they still have, okay, but for us, right? So for a lot of Muslims, the line is covering your hair. For some Muslims, it's covering your face. For my aunts, you don't have to cover your hair and you can have like sleeves and a short skirt or whatever, but obviously you shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. That's the line for immorality. That's what the book says. So everyone's just making up their own, like Hazard Sin is saying, and we're stuck having to sit and with a microscope try to dissect the text and see how we can twist it to conform to our belief. And it's so intellectually frustrating for me. Yet, practically speaking, that is the way we can make change, right? I'm not going to be able to convince people out of their religion a lot of the time. Sometimes I have. And many of the people that I have read up on that have led me to my beliefs have also gotten a lot of people out of their beliefs. And those people, especially younger people, a lot of younger people in Iran are atheists, and it's so sad to me that is illegal in some countries, that you're not allowed to think that way. And like I said, when people in America ignore the injustices there because they're like, oh, I don't want to be Islamophobic, you are abandoning those groups of people in those countries that need our voices the most, because you're afraid of offending a religion where a religion should be offended. Religion should be offended, okay? You have a right to believe whatever you want. You don't have a right to believe whatever you want and walk around freely without criticism. That's not how it works. So you are free to be a Muslim, and I will respect you as a human being. I have so many friends that are Muslim, and I have so many amazing people that are better people than me. By every measure, they are better people than me. They are kinder, they are more giving, they are sweeter, but that does not mean that they are correct and that I have to sit there and not criticize this religion. And that's something that has always rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm not saying that's a place that's the conversation that needs to be had now, right now. I think it is, hey, this government is oppressing its people. Nobody should live under a religious doctrine. It should be secular. And this government needs to get the fuck out. But at the same time, that it's not a completely separate conversation from because yes, the government has these issues, and then the culture, I actually think that what's happening with the government in Iran is having the opposite effect on the culture. Like the culture, especially with young people, from what I'm hearing and seeing, they're turning extra away from religion. Like it's actually pushing them away more. And that's what the conservative people in Iran are saying as like a criticism of this. Oh, you guys shouldn't be doing stuff like this. You shouldn't obviously be enforcing these rules so harshly because it's turning these young people away from religion. Like that's the problem. But I think, like I said, people have human rights and people deserve to be respected. No idea deserves to be respected, and no doctrine deserves to be able to exist freely without criticism. That is the beauty of having freedom and the freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and being somewhere where we can actually engage in the marketplace of ideas, and let's use it to the greatest extent that we can and question everything and have these difficult discussions and try to get to the truth. Okay, I like how you're not scared to vocalize stuff. Yeah, that ship has sailed. I find them annoying. Oh, Kardashians? Yeah, I agree. I think I read that already. There are two versions of sex: romantic and sex like it just exists. Yeah, so obviously certain people connect sex with like this celestial bond, like the soul connection of two people, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. I still don't get why it's morality is involved in that. You can view sex as a really sacred thing, but that doesn't mean that it's also needs to be done in a certain way to be moral, right? So for me, I don't think that I'm totally fine with people viewing. I mean, I've talked about this. I don't like having casual sex, not because I just doesn't make me, I don't like it. It doesn't, I like having sex with people that I have an emotional connection with. I enjoy it that way. I don't necessarily enjoy the act without more being there, but that doesn't mean it's immoral. I also don't like sushi. Like I don't like other things too. And I think that there is some people who do view it this way, have attached morality to it, and have used and have been able to do so because of societal norms and biblical and Quran and all this other stuff. But yeah, interesting. You speak Persian? Yes, I speak Farsi. Excellent position. This is why I show for this podcast. Thank you. What if someone pushes back saying, how come it's okay for democratic governments to push for, if you could put this comment on the screen. What if someone pushes back saying, how come it's okay for democratic governments to push for mandatory face masks that can cause literal breathing problems? Meanwhile, it's wrong to force a woman to wear a simple headscarf. Okay, this reminds me. So this pissed me the fuck off, but I think I've told you this before. I spend a lot of time consuming content that I vehemently disagree with. Now I try to consume content that I vehemently disagree with that has some intellectual stimulation in it for me, like that people I disagree with that are able to make good points, back up their points, use evidence. But sometimes I just watch people that are popular on that. And I was watching a segment Candace Owens did on this, and she made the same art. It was disgusting to me because she literally was like, so wrong what they're doing to the women there. But well, look at what we're doing. We're forcing people, we're policing people for wearing masks. Like, to me, it's like, nobody was murdered, first of all, for not wearing a mask. But back to the point, I still want to put it up. But I thought that was completely disrespectful for not saying that you're doing what she's doing. I think your question is perfect in this context, but I think what she did is so dismissive to the oppression that people there are going, where they have no rights at all. And you're comparing that to being forced to wear a mask in a grocery store. Now, I like I said, I've said this a bunch of times before. You should be free to do whatever you want as long as you're not harming other people. That's the thing. So when there's a global pandemic, right? And again, this is my view on it. Nobody should be forced to get vaccinated. Nobody should have to worry about losing their job whether or not they are vaccinated. I was completely against vaccine mandates, all of that, because I think that is a violation of human rights. However, when it comes to public spaces or private corporations, because this was something that people used to say all the time, well, I want to shop at Nordstrom and I have a right not to wear it. No, you don't have a right to be in Nordstrom at all. You have absolutely no right to be at Nordstrom. You have absolutely no right to be at any store. You have absolutely no, if the corporation says we implement masks, if Subway across the street said we still want to do masks, you don't have a right to be at Subway without a mask. You don't have a right to be in Subway at all. So I want to make that distinction, because American people, for some reason, really don't get that. Like, they don't get that you do not have a right to just anybody's business and anybody stay on your terms. But I think when it comes to, we were in a pandemic and we need to implement measures to keep other people safe, so we're going to implement face masks. When you say they can cause literal breathing problems, where are you getting that data? Are you getting that data from like the rare person that may have some type of, medical issue, and so a mask will be a lot harder for them to wear? Very rare. For most of us it's not comfortable, but it wasn't killing us. And for a short period of time, we're wearing masks because we don't want to harm everybody, right? This is the thing we're doing to keep everybody safe, because your decisions can impact other people, right? With morality, this is why I want to question morality. So with this, you could be like, okay, well, masks aren't actually effective because of this evidence, or we have conflict. These are great discussions to be had, right? When a government is forcing a woman to wear a headscarf because it's moral, it's the moral thing to do, and you are to protect society from lust, I don't think that's the same thing. When you say people can't be gay, they can't speak out against the government, they are completely without rights, I don't think it's the same thing as saying, hey, when you go to Trader Joe's, wear a mask for a year. That's what I think about that. Okay, let me see what, oh, you guys are having, how secular countries also have rooms and dressing as well. Your liberal descendants in the future will probably laugh at your generation for believing it was wrong for women to walk around the street naked. Your medieval ancestors would probably look at your situation in the same way. So I was thinking about this point too, like, okay, well then why can't people just walk around completely naked, right? I think dress code, like to a degree, right? Like going out and seeing like grown male penises in public where there are children is not something, it's something that we could easily argue is not good for the well-being of society, right? Forcing people to cover like, you know, their breasts and their super private parts, I think is completely fine. But people like, you could go out in the street in a bikini, even if you're not by a pool. Now, if you go into a store, again, like I said, the store can kick you out for whatever reason they want to. They can make their own rules, as long as the rules are not like super discriminatory and are going to have constitutional challenges. They can make their own rules, right? They can be like, right, there's restaurants that say you cannot be in here if, or there are places, venues that you can't carry a person. I was at a concert the other day, I couldn't bring a person to the concert. Well, it's my right to carry a person. No, it's not. It's my right to carry a person, but not my right to go to the concert. So I think that, yeah, it's true that as time goes on, our dress code may change, and we may have different viewpoints, and maybe what we're wearing now, I think any generation we look back, we're like, what the fuck were they wearing? But I don't see how that's a relevant point. Okay, I feel like I'm behind because I'm like reading a comment and then and like you guys have already, I was referring to the distinction between public health mandates and morality enforced. Yes, hazard stand, I like mumbled on, but that is literally what I'm saying. Public health is very different than forcing your doctrine of morality onto people with force. Now, with the mass social conversation, I'm all for. I'm not saying people shouldn't question maybe the actual efficacy of wearing masks. If there is evidence contrary to it being very effective, we should discuss it, and we should be like, hey, this mandate should not be in place because it actually doesn't protect us from the virus. Okay, now tell me why. Maybe I'll show you some evidence that it does, and we can debate that, and we should be like, what should the government be doing to protect people? That's completely fine. But government, it's like vaccinating your kids to go to school. And I think now, I don't know if you guys have heard, but so many people are like not vaccinating their kids, that we have diseases have returned that have been out of the public sphere for generations, and now they're back because people stop vaccinating their kids. When it comes to stuff like that, again, right? Consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want as long as they're not hurting other people. If there is a global pandemic and people need to go get groceries, I don't think it's the same thing as the government saying, hey, you know, when you're somewhere where people normally have to be. And I did like to make this like distinct. Like last year I was at a Universal Horror Nights, and I don't agree with the way California handled COVID for the most part. And this was one of the reasons. It was like last year, and we were all like forced to wear masks, even though we're all like squished together. And I'm like, okay, if you're going to an event like Universal, you're choosing to be there you should choose if you want to wear a mask or not. But when it came to places that people like have to go, like the grocery store, the airport, I think those are different. But that's just my opinion, right? I'm not the arbiter of what's wrong or right, but I think the bottom line is issue related to public safety, public health, protecting everybody versus you are immoral, you're inciting lust, and you need to cover yourself and follow my religion because that's the law of the land. Fashion designers wear body paint naked as models do in the US, and you can still wait. I meant that both have mandatory clothing requirements. The West, okay, wear body paint naked like some IGs models do around in public. Okay, I think I addressed that. If you're in public, you could be causing harm to other people if you are just naked. Like, I don't think a 6-year-old child needs to see somebody's penis or, right? My content, there's a reason it's 18 and over. That doesn't mean kids don't stumble upon it, but kids that stumble upon it or are searching the internet for porn is different than kids that are just playing at the park and I come and I'm like, woo, that's not appropriate. However, there are places like nude beaches that are for adults only where people are allowed to be naked. So in Europe, especially, but even here, there used to be a nude beach close to where I used to live most of my life. But there's no public place where a woman can take off her hijab in Iran. And that kind of tells you that there is a difference, right? Between, right? No one's like, you have to wear clothes. The government isn't like, you have to wear clothes because it's moral and it's what God wants. No, the government's like, you need to wear clothes in public because it's a public space and we need to respect other people in the public space that we're all sharing. I think that's very different. Yeah, but who gives the government the right to determine what is moral to wear? Exactly. And face masks, if they were pushing face masks as like why are we not wearing face masks anymore? It's the face mask wasn't the government telling you what you have to wear. Face mask was a measure to protect people from getting a very new, scary, disease. Now, whether or not you think it was as big of a deal or it was overblown, that's a completely different thing, right? But let's say COVID was killing 50% of the people that got it. And the government was like, okay, this is killing 50% of the people that got it. Everybody wear masks so that we can prevent that in public spaces. You think that's the government saying that it was moral to wear? To be fair to the Muslims, at least they appeal to higher authority to determine what his clothing is meant. But so you don't think it's right for the government to decide, but you think it's okay as long as you're appealing to some type of ancient doctrine? What? Don't understand. Anti-vax people could still be arrested, right? No, they're not getting arrested. I don't know where you're hearing this. And I did also say that if the government was enforcing vaccines, I would have a huge issue with that. I had an issue. Canada did it with government employees. I think that's completely immoral. I don't like that. But I don't think that's the same as saying that when you go to Nordstrom, wear a mask. And that's Nordstrom's policy too. How many people do you know yeah, exactly. How many people do you know that have been arrested for not getting vaxxed? That's what I'm saying. Give me a Massa Amini for not vaxxing. Give me an example. Give me an example of somebody who was murdered by the morality police. Who's the morality police, right? Candace Owens made this argument that the morality police is liberals. And that was disgusting to me. You're comparing regular people that have the same amount of power as you in a grocery store that tell you to, yeah, I think that's obnoxious to be in the grocery store and be like, I wouldn't do that. But they can't throw you in a van and beat you to death. There's a difference. They can't take you away from your family for this. Okay, everyone knows you. None, because all of them are vaccinated. Okay, everyone you know is vaxxed. How can you confirm? Okay, there's a lot of people I know that aren't vaxxed. None of them have been killed. None of them have been arrested. And none of them have lost their jobs. I think if they were to lose their jobs or be killed or arrested, I would be speaking out against that as well. However, this is not happening. Whereas the people in Iran have been oppressed, not just from the years of 2020 to 2021, where the mask mandate was a thing, but for generations, right? So I just think that's so ignorant. It's more of protecting elders. Young people have a strong immune system, from my view. I think that's a fair point. And again, you can talk about what makes sense. Should the government be doing this? What does the science actually say? But let's remember that with COVID, okay, this was something new. The whole world was like flipped on its fucking head over this. This is not something this is something that rocked the world. We didn't know what we were dealing with. We didn't know what was happening. I'm not saying everything, the science has changed. Of course, it's not something that has been studied for generations. It's not something the scientists had a long time to really look at and see it was really novel, right? And so we were just doing the best that we could. Did we make mistakes? Absolutely. Absolutely. I just was in Canada not long ago, and I had to wear a mask on the plane. I was like annoyed, but I would never be arrogant enough to sit there and be like, oh, the government is, oh my God, this is just like being in Iran and being murdered for putting my hair out. Come on now. Isn't it just two options? Government. Yeah, exactly. Man, the morality police in Iran aren't even religious, to be honest. I've been doing some research on it. It seems like Massa might have been killed on a racial basis. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about, okay? They're not religious. I mean, I don't know what their personal beliefs are. They may just be soldiers in an army. I don't know if every person that was not every Nazi soldier truly believed in Hitler's message. Do you know that? I could be like, well, the Nazis that were running Auschwitz, they didn't really believe in Hitler's message. They were just implementing it. So what I mean, I really like that you're having this dialogue. I think it's really interesting. So continue. But come on now. The morality police do have to be religious, but do not have to be religious, but they are exactly. Okay. Hazard stint, you are like putting it into words much better than I'm saying it. They are implementing a religious regime. So I don't care about their personal beliefs. I don't care if they're going home, if those people that killed her went back home and they were like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do that. Right? I don't care. They still did it because of this ideology. So when you say at least they're pointing to like a moral, same with Hitler's army, right? Well, they're just following Hitler. At least they're appealing to an authority, Hitler, right? Do you see where your argument fails? Yes. So immoral versus public health and safety during a pandemic is very different versus saying this is immoral by our sky god and we will force this upon you for the rest of human existence. Nobody, when they were enforcing masks, were saying that we're going to do this for the rest of our lives, and because that is what the COVID gods have said. So forever. No, we were like, oh my God, this is a pandemic. People are getting sick. We don't want people to get the virus. There's, masks may prevent this, so we're going to implement masks until we can get this under control. That is a completely different situation than, wearing hair or having your hair out can make you too pretty, which is very immoral, or too sexy or whatever, or shows your beauty, which is immoral. So this is objectively going to be the case forever. I don't know what that means. Private no. Sorry. You guys, this is how I have to type. I did the whole bar exam with nails like this. Respect for higher authority, appeal to authority. This is all just a big red flag for absolute corruption of government powers. Yes. And that is a different thing than saying, oh, well, our science said this at the time and now it says this. So we were all fucking idiots for believing that, and how immoral and how stupid is the government to believe the science at the time. That's like saying when everyone thought the earth was flat, that everybody was such an idiot and we were all so stupid, and how the fuck did they, like, no, that's just what we thought. Now, why did Galileo get killed for this? Because of religion. Why did he get killed for coming out and saying, oh, actually, I think it's round? So very different things, right? So if the science was wrong at one point, I'm not saying, or if there was any corruption, I can't sit here and say that everything was done perfectly. There was nothing going on behind the scenes. But with the information that we have, I think for the most part, people did the best they could. Like I said, I don't think it's right for people to force people to put something into their bodies that they don't want to put into their bodies. Don't think that is okay. But wearing a mask when you go to Trader Joe's for a year, you can tell me that you don't think that's right, but don't you dare compare that to what is going on in countries where people are being murdered for being gay and not believing in this authority. You don't get killed here if you're an anti-vaxxer. Right? You can come online right now and you can say, I don't believe in this. You're able to say this online. In Iran, I would get killed for what I'm saying right now online. Well, maybe they could kill me for this. They would have no hesitation in killing me for this. You are under no threat of being killed for voicing your opinion on my Twitch stream. Khomeini had some weird jurisprudence. My Muslim friends tell me that according to their standards, he wasn't a Muslim because he wrote one of his books. He believes goat sex permissible. I need to find the reference. What does this have to do with anything? Khomeini, if he had one belief somewhere that didn't align, that doesn't mean that he didn't implement religious law and enforce it on the people. So for you to sit here and say, no, his interpretation is incorrect, fine. That's what a lot of other Muslim people say. And that was my whole point, is how ridiculous is it that we have to, the only way that you feel like you can disavow Khomeini is by finding a flaw in his interpretation of jurisprudence. I hate that there are people that have to do this to be able to say, no, it's like people who are like, well, are these people really Christians because they believe this? Or, oh, you can't, there are people who say, oh, are you really Muslim if you believe that women shouldn't cover their hair? Because the book says that they should, but you're saying that they can't. You can't tell people, okay, now you're not a Muslim, or you can say you're interpreting the doctrine wrong, but I don't see your point here. The point was, he was saying that Iran is becoming too much like the West, that morality has eroded its people, and we are going to come into power and we are going to restore religious authority. So you're saying some Muslims, and he said we're going to instate Islamic law. Now you're saying, well, somewhere he said this and that doesn't align with the book, therefore he's not Muslim. What? But Jazmen, there's no camera. We're showing people walking upside down and driving in Australia. But I'm probably just not cool enough to get the joke. Okay, well, if you guys want some more dialogue, I am more than happy to continue. But yeah, I think we need another logical fallacy podcast episode, or at least to the YouTube replay of that episode. Yes, so Mr. Ahrar first, I think you should go check my YouTube channel. We did an episode on logical fallacies. And I think that would be a good refresher for everybody, but maybe in particular you. So again, don't know what really this has to do with masks. I think but you can bring that up, and we clearly spent a lot of time addressing that. Last point I want to make is, there are so many things that are going on in the world, so many injustices that are going on in the world, that it's like, oh my God, what do we do, right? Like, there's this going on in Iran. Glad people are speaking up about it. People are like, oh, people are going to stop speaking up about it and everything's going to go back the way it is. I think that's just the reality of the world, right? There's plenty of people, like when something's uprising in Palestine, we can cover it, but then people go back to their new lives. Oh, now there's Ukraine, now there's Iran. There's just so much. And there's kind of like, what is our responsibility? And for me, I think of it as like, you shouldn't be an activist because you want to bring about change, because one, it's going to be unlikely in a lot of situations. And there's just not enough time in the day for you to address every single injustice in the world and try to change everything. But I think this goes back to living in alignment with our values. So speak up about this stuff because that's who you are, and fight for your values, and speak up for people who can't speak up for themselves, because that is who you are. That is who you want to be. And that is the values and the person that you have determined to be, that you want to live in alignment with, right? You can't maybe change anything, right? But you can still use your voice to speak, especially in our situation, because so many people don't have this right. How lucky are we to use it? Let's use it as much as we can, whenever we can, when we feel compelled to do so. And that's really the best we can do, right? We can't gauge our activism on how much it worked. That's not, like we said, right? Your goal shouldn't be extrinsic. Your goal shouldn't be, I mean, it would be great. I would love if people were stopped suffering, if injustices ceased, but that can't be the reason that you are doing something, right? It can't be the extrinsic goal, although in this case, a very noble one, and I would love for it to happen, but do it because and it's who you are, and you're doing it to be you, to be somebody that you want to be and who you admire and who you like, right? And I could do better with this. I think we all get caught up in our own lives. But for this particular topic, as somebody who puts explicit adult content online that is Iranian, that fear, I won't go back right now because I fear for my life. That's really sad. Do I fear for my breathing capabilities when I have to wear a mask on an airplane? It's a minor annoyance, but it's not the same thing. Not to go back to that, but I just think that's such a ignorant and rather disturbing point that I'm glad that he made that point, so that me and Hazard Stint, and I'm sure many other people would agree. Plus, it's your homeland, not just, I have a lot of family members there, and I have parents that go back there, and I have, it is a place that I would love to go. And even before I started doing this, I didn't want to go because I knew all these rules would be enforced on me. And now I don't think I can't go. I can't go because I'm immoral. Because what I do doesn't align with religion that the government has imposed on others. But let's not also forget that while majority of the people wouldn't want me killed, they would disagree with what I'm doing, which they have the complete right to do. But that's why I want these conversations to be had. There is the layer of what people have the freedom to do and the government and oppression of the people, but there's also social conversations that need to be had, right? Like I said, the government and the people are very different. However, it's not like even in the United States that everybody's like, oh yeah, you should be able to live however you want. You should be gay if you want to be gay. I think the majority of people in Iran would be like, well, the younger people, like I said, they're almost like us now because they're like, fuck you, government. But speak up about this stuff. There shouldn't be social ostracism. I'm not even gonna try to say that word. Because of stuff like this either. Doesn't mean that I have a right to walk somewhere and not have people disagree with what I'm doing. No, but I can also bring forth my viewpoint, and you guys should speak about your values and question these religious and societal norms as well. Okay, anything else? That's that sound I make. It's like, why do you make that sound? I'm like, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed. I didn't plan what I was going to say for this because I just wanted to be genuine and I wanted it to be like a discussion. To anyone interested in Persian news headlines, BBC Persian is a great Instagram follow. Yes, BBC Persian is a great Instagram follow. Twitter, right? Look at the people, the videos coming out of Iran, the videos of what people are seeing in Iran, actual content coming from Iranian people. If it's able to get online, they are going through a lot to get you guys that information. They have nothing other than an appeal to the rest of the world. And that's why they're taking these videos. That's why they're risking their lives. And that's why they're telling you that they're risking their lives, so that you, when you see it or when you come across it, or seek it out, so that you know and that you can share what's happening too, and put enough pressure that, we'll see what happens. I don't know, right? We never know. But that's a way that we can use our voice for people that don't have one. Unlike the guy in here who has a voice and he can express his great dismay over masks and compare it to the death of Massa. So, all right, I hope everybody has a good rest of your night. If you guys have more ideas on this, or you want to bring about your viewpoint or talk to me about it, my DMs are open via Instagram, Snapchat, OnlyFans. You can also email the podcast email. On Monday, we're going to discuss porn. I guess I kind of have strong views on it. We're going to be discussing what evidence there is on porn, right? Porn addiction, how to responsibly consume porn. These are going to be things that I want to discuss as somebody that is in the adult content making industry. So that will be Monday, 6:30 Pacific time. And then I think I will be doing a Q&A next week for the second one. So you guys can send me your questions. Some of you did this a while ago when I was going to do a Q&A before. If you did, please send them to me again. It's screenshotted somewhere on my phone, but I don't know where. I'm going to create a new folder and have all your questions. So hope everybody has a really good night. Stay safe. And thank you for spending your Saturday evening, if it's Saturday evening for you, listening to me discuss something that is very near and dear to my heart and to all the people in Iran. Nice straw man of arguments I wasn't even making. Whatever happened to intellectual discussion? Okay. So for those of you that don't want to continue this, you can go. But I would like to know what straw man. So explain yourself. So, because I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to misrepresent anybody's arguments, but I don't think that I did. So if you can give me an example, I can address it. I will stick around for a few more minutes to wait for that. If you send me one, I will address it on live before the broadcast ends. If not, then you can continue this in DMs. I want this to be, when you say whatever happened to intellectual discussion, that's why I'm continuing this broadcast, even though I want to end it. Bai doesn't have a good one. No. I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to, I know some people are like, you shouldn't be engaging, but I'm going to give him an opportunity to explain what I'm supposedly doing. At this point in the discussion, the burden of proof of Jazz points is on you. So I was literally addressing your exact comments that you made, and I was addressing those points. If I misrepresented something, let me know what I misrepresented. I'll wait like another minute, but otherwise, I don't want to sit here and wait for that or have everybody else wait, but here's your opportunity to go in about that. Because I think that if you think that I did the straw man fallacy, that sorry, I'm getting a private chat from my moderator. You accused me of the mouth and and to mandatory hijab laws. I literally just presented that as a potential rebuttal to your viewpoint. Okay, I don't know what the last thing means. Yeah, okay, I'm going to scroll up. I'm just going to do this and then I'm going to leave because I'm going to go back to your comment. You did make that comparison, right? You compared the two. When you're saying, oh, it was just a rebuttal, your rebuttal was comparing the two. Yeah. What if someone pushes back saying, how come it's okay for democratic governments push for mandatory face masks? So if your argument is that you weren't saying it, but you were making the argument on behalf of someone, then everything I said was in response to your argument and not you personally. But this was the argument that you made, and this was the argument that I addressed, accurately reflecting your views. Okay. Or the views of said person that you were, making this claim on behalf of. Okay. All right, guys. Bye. End broadcast.